This podcast mini-series is kindly sponsored by Ellucian. Ellucian combines higher education expertise, focused innovation, and deep partnership to help universities navigate digital transformation. Serving more than 2,900 higher education institutions worldwide, Ellucian is your trusted partner for driving institution-wide success. Visit Ellucian.com to discover the complete integrated Ellucian software as a service platform and how it seamlessly connects people, processes, and applications across your institution. I'm Susanna Marsden, and welcome to Job Shadowing HE Managing Change mini-series, sponsored by Ellucian. Each episode hears from guests about change initiatives happening in their organisation, their role within that, and some personal reflections on working in a change environment. My guest in this episode is Luke Phillimore, Associate Director of Change at the University of Nottingham. Luke has worked in a number of HE roles in two different universities before he was appointed to his Associate Director role in early 2024. In this episode, Luke shares more about the role he has in supporting people through change, explores the value of the Lean Six Sigma methodology, discusses why the skill of influencing without authority is so valuable in the change environment, and focuses on why engaging in external networks can bring so much value and opportunity. Luke, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being my guest today. I'm going to start by asking about you and your role. You're Associate Director of Change at the University of Nottingham, one of the UK's largest universities. Can you tell us a bit more about your job, your team, and where you fit organisationally within the university?
I think I'll start with the last part of that question, which is where I fit in organisationally. So I work in a directorate called Planning, Performance and Strategic Change, and I'm one of the senior managers within the projects and change function. The directorate, or PBSC itself, is a wide remit for the university. So it provides clear data, insight, governance and frameworks to ensure that the university invests in and successfully delivers initiatives and activities which will deliver its vision and strategic outcomes. And it maintains a holistic view of strategy plans, data and projects to bring people together from across the institution, building connections and reducing silos. Now, obviously, I can't remember that off the top of my head, so I have that was the bit I am going to read for this interview. But really, my role is on the change side. I have a responsibility for leading a relatively small change management function, and we are responsible for helping land the change that the university wants to do within its large strategic investment portfolio. There's around 18 projects and programs. It shouldn't vary, but it does vary as to how many are in there, depending on progress on those particular projects and programs, where they're up to, and whether something is just rolling into business as usual and whether something is quite started up enough yet to be classed as being in the portfolio. And those projects are, a range of things. So we have a large digital project called Digital Core. I heard the podcast with Louise Savage and she talked a little bit about that. That's to replace our finance, procurement and HR systems. And then we have people-based projects, infrastructure-based projects, policy-based projects. So you kind of name it, we've got them. As well as supporting the strategic investment portfolio, I also have a wider remit for helping embed successful change across the university. That's through implementing and developing a change management framework, which we have in place. It's going through a bit of a review and we will continuously improve that as we go. We also have a change community of practice where colleagues from around the university who are interested in change can come together and get guidance, support, training, etc. Within that community of practice, we're just establishing 3 different levels of colleague who are involved in the community of practice. So it's not to do with their level within the organisation, it's to do with their level in terms of whether they're leading change, supporting change, or just impacted by change. And then as a longer term aspiration, I'm also looking to create a network of change champions. They'll be across the university who are there ready to be activated to help deliver change in their local areas.
And from what you say there, I mean, there's a huge amount going on at Nottingham. You mentioned up to sort of 18 strategic projects there. It sounds like it could be quite complex for people to navigate that. What role do you have in helping people sort of work their way through the volume of change that's going on?
There really is such a wide range of change that's impacting our colleagues within the university. And it is complex and it can be confusing. Even if you're in it in the moment, it can be confusing. Part of my job and my team's job and PPSC's job is to try and make it not feel like that to those people on the receiving end of the change. For me, change is all about the people, and wherever we can, if we can co-create that change and the solutions with the people, well, the solution itself will be of better quality, the people will accept it better, and the impact will be felt to a lesser degree, or the negative impact obviously will have a much higher positive impact.
HE job titles are always an interesting topic, and you have a senior professional services role as we said at the start, Associate Director of Change. And I'm wondering to what extent you have the opportunity to shape and drive the university's change agenda, and also how you work with the university's senior team.
I mean, I sit on numerous committees, boards, etc. The one that has a particular focus on change it's called Portfolio Board. That's the senior board with oversight of the strategic investment portfolio, so the 18. It's chaired by our chief financial officer, and it's a cross-section of our UEB members plus some other senior colleagues. And through that board, I'm working with colleagues to think about and to shape how change impact is monitored. Can we visualize it in some way to give a better sense of what's going on? And really driving the discussion so it's not just from a more traditional project management perspective of time, cost, quality, but that we're also considering the people, and fingers crossed, leading to enhanced decision making.
Reading up on you before today, I saw that you're a qualified Lean Six Sigma black belt holder. Can you tell us a bit more about what Lean Six Sigma is? And I'm also wondering if your colleagues or listeners to this podcast should be at all daunted to know that you hold a black belt in this.
So the very short answer is no, you shouldn't be daunted. So there's two parts to it. There's Lean and then there's Six Sigma. And Lean comes from Toyota, the car manufacturing company, which is obviously a Japanese company. And therefore it follows a belt system, just like a martial art would. So traditionally you go, there's not many of them. It's yellow, green, black, and then black belt master. The methodology itself is close to my heart. It has a key principle of respect for people. So there's two. There's respect for people and there's continuous improvement. But the respect for people part is really, really important to me. And it's really important in my current role. And it means that it's a fundamental part of how I work. It involves working with people across all levels to help them solve their own problems, help them own those changes that we can co-create. And what it doesn't mean is that I have any particular martial arts skill. I did get to yellow belt at judo when I was a teenager, so that was the limit. My brother, though, is a black belt at judo, so maybe we can have some kind of face-off. Now, Lean itself, as I said, it comes from Japan. It was a term coined by some American academics. They went over to study the company because they wanted to know why it was so successful despite having much fewer resources. And the term lean was coined because one of the things they found was that they cut out all of the waste from their processes. So that's where it comes from. Would say if you went over to Toyota and you said, tell me how you do lean, they'd probably just look at you a bit funny. It's not really a thing that they recognize. It's just the way they work rather than a kind of a methodology that they have coined. So that's the lean part. The other part is Six Sigma, which is a quality methodology. So it's about driving really, really high quality products through a series of improvements. That comes from Motorola, who I only know through phones. Presumably they make other things as well. And that was developed through the 80s and 90s. And then it was adopted by other organizations. And it's a really stringent quality measure. And what they were really looking to do is eliminate defects from their processes and their products. And then the two things sort of came together. You will find that some people specialize in lean rather than Six Sigma and vice versa. I am probably nearer on the lean side. But really, the key is that it doesn't really matter. You do lean, you do Six Sigma. What you're actually doing is working with people to make things better. And they both focus on working with colleagues, helping them be empowered to own the changes. And if it's done right, it leads to a highly engaged workforce that's focused on continuous improvement.
And you've talked quite a lot in the answers that you've given so far about the importance of people. And a common theme running throughout the mini-series has been the fact that where people have talked about putting in different processes or systems or implementation of technology, it is people that are at the core of change and their engagement in that and beyond the change process. Reflecting on what you've just been talking about there on Lean Six Sigma, I'm interested to know more about how you do engage with colleagues in that activity and how they engage with you.
I'm quite a visual person, so I'm going to try and describe a picture since I can't show you it because it's a podcast. If you were to draw a triangle and a normal way up triangle, so an equilateral triangle, the top corner represents the senior leaders of an organization or a change program. I'm interested as to how far down that triangle you need to get to in order to actually engage with people who are going to have to change how they are doing things and adopt those changes. And in my experience, we spend way too much time at the top of that triangle and not enough time exploring other areas. I think sometimes we actually do the opposite and we spend too much time at the lower end of the triangle and not enough time at the top. Every layer is important. The middle layer, and I say this a lot at Nottingham, if you don't engage with that middle layer, they are actually the people who are going to be able to free up time, free up resources, agree to changes, etc. And it's all very well a senior leader saying you must do something, but actually working down the triangle, all the way through the triangle, you're going to get a much better embedded change. So with lean in particular, I would expect colleagues of all levels to be engaged with. We wouldn't run an improvement just with the senior leaders. We wouldn't run it just with the middle management. We would want to work with the full spectrum of colleagues. And really, that's my number one most effective way of getting buy-in to any changes. Depending on what you're trying to do, engaging with that triangle can be difficult. We have around 8,000 staff at the University of Nottingham. So if we were going to do something that was impacting 8,000 staff, then, well, can you really engage with every single person? Probably not. But with Digital Core, we have change enablers. That's the standard way of doing it, where you have people, again, all layers of that triangle who you can use to work with, represent their colleagues, and act as champions and advocates in their areas. Something else that I think people often forget about change is it's not really how good the product is or the deliverable is that makes a project successful. It's actually whether or not people are going to change how they work based on it. And that could be a new, a physical product, could be a new system, new building, new policy. Is completely irrelevant. If people aren't going to adopt it, it's not going to be useful. I was trying to think of a nice generic example that everyone could relate to. GDPR, everyone knows GDPR. And if an organization identified a risk that maybe GDPR principles were not being followed routinely, is tweaking their internal policy on GDPR going to make any difference to that? No, not really. Would an email from a senior leader saying you must now do this make any difference? Nope. But working with the people who have to adopt the changes that GDPR brought, that would make a difference. You can always see it when you work with people and they feel empowered to make those changes. You can see it in them that actually, yes, they are. You can have confidence that they're going to walk out the room and they are going to start working in a different way because they've been part of that change.
And I know that you're currently doing some work with colleagues across the sector to explore the extent to which the lean approach and the concept of change management intersect. Can you say a bit more about the background to your thinking on that topic and how you're taking it forward?
So something that I am keen to do is try not to get too institutionalized. I've been at the University of Nottingham 12 years. It helps to be there for that long because I understand the organisation. I can adapt my ways of working. But it's also really important for me to engage with the wider sector. Now, when I took on my current role, moving from a senior lean practitioner role into a change management role, bigger projects, more complexity. But I was like, almost, why does change management even exist when there's already this thing over here that I know really well and really comfortable with, which is lean, and I know that works. So I am a member of Lean HE, which is an international network of lean practitioners in higher education. So I asked them, what do you think the difference is? And why would you do one and not the other? Would you always choose change management practices if you're doing a large programmatic change, or maybe would you use lean? And I had a big response, much bigger than I was expecting. So I'd touched a nerve, I think a positive nerve, but certainly an interested nerve, if that's the thing. I then chaired an initial discussion meeting. There were about 40 people, and we had a discussion. We did a Miro board, and then we finished it by saying, does anyone want to carry on this conversation? Lots of people said yes. And then I was like, okay, well, we can't all carry on the discussion together at the same time. So does anyone interested in working with me to kind of drive what the conversation might be? And following that, I'm working with 4 other colleagues now, 4 different institutions in the UK. And we are unpicking the question, why change management, why lean, which one's the best approach, and when, and does it even matter? Who knows? So we've done a survey of UK institutions. We've had around 30 unique responses, so 30 different institutions. So again, quite a range. My colleague Linda, who is the Lean HE network chair for one of our regions, has also passed that out to the Europe and America network. So we're looking a little bit further abroad as well. And a lot of people have responded. A lot of differences in approach, which is interesting. And what we're going to do next is do some case study interviews, and then hopefully, if my abstract is accepted, do a workshop at the International Lean HE conference, which is in Cambridge next year. So I think it's in March, where we can gather more information again. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to try and get some kind of publication out of it. That's the plan. But purely from a selfish point of view, as I said at the start, I've worked at Nottingham for 12 years. I'm really interested in knowing what's going on everywhere else, so I can bring all of that knowledge, that information back into my own institution.
You've worked in higher education since the start of your career, and you've undertaken several roles at Nottingham Trent University before moving, as you said, to the University of Nottingham, where you've been for several years. In reading your LinkedIn profile, I noticed that one of the skills you mention in relation to several of the roles that you've had in the earlier part of your career was influencing without authority. Now, that's likely to be a familiar experience with many people listening. And I wondered to what extent you felt that that skill was a benefit in supporting others through change in those earlier parts of your career, and also to what extent it supported you in your own professional development.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And influencing without authority is probably something that anyone in my type of role needs. It also made me think I need to update my LinkedIn profile because I definitely still need it. I don't really feel, even though I'm in a more senior role now, I don't feel like I have any more authority. I'm just trying to influence more people without any authority. All of my roles, or many of my roles, have required me to have influence and to influence people. That might be peers, might be people more junior to me, it might be people more senior. It doesn't really make any difference. I struggle to really remember a role when I've had the authority just to tell them what needs to be done. And I don't really think that works anyway. I mean, we've already touched on, if you tell people to do things, do they actually do it? Sometimes, not often. So what I have had to do in all of my roles is building credibility and trust, and to be pragmatic and flexible or nuanced in my approach. If you think about credibility and trust, I find it surprising, but often in my career, I have had it reflected back to me that I will do what I said I'm going to do, and as though that isn't the normal approach, which I find very surprising, because normally if you say you're going to do something, you should probably do it. So that immediately builds credibility and trust. If you say, okay, well, I'm going to take that away and I will do something, then you actually do it, then that will build that credibility and trust. The other thing, and this is something that I really developed whilst being a senior lean practitioner, was a reliance on data to support my approach. Using data to evidence what the problem is, whether or not it's got better or worse, it is such a powerful way of building that credibility and trust. But it's also a way of taking the emotion out of the debate. So it stops being about the person, and it just starts being about the process, the problem, the service, whatever it might be. And if you get your data right, it's really hard to argue with it. And that's even in an academic environment where often you will get challenged a lot, and that's fine. In terms of the pragmatic or a nuanced approach, well, there's always more than one way to tackle a problem. And listening to people, hearing what they're saying, and then meeting them somewhere in the middle, as long as you know what the end goal is and you can see a way to get there, then it is much better to meet them in the middle. When I did my black belt training, there was a lot of it that resonated with me, but there was one particular slide, and it was like this, the change management bit of the course, and they put up an equation, and all it said was the effectiveness of something is only equal to the quality of that product or the solution times by the acceptance of people to adopt it. And again, I've already touched on this a lot during this conversation, but what it means in practice is that it doesn't really matter how good your idea is. If people aren't going to adopt it, then there's no point delivering it. So sometimes in my role, in any role, sometimes it's better just to settle for what you think might be the less good outcome, if it means that people are actually going to adopt it. Just as a kind of a real example, one of the projects I've been working on for about 18 months now, it's called Rethinking Personal Tutoring. And we're looking at how to change how we deliver personal tutoring as a service within the university. And Andy Fisher, who's the academic lead for it and is our senior tutor at the university, he said it over and over again, and I've started saying it, and now when he forgets to say it, I will say it for him, and so we repeat it back to each other. So we're talking to some people, and they're picking holes in the model that we've come up with. That's fine, but the comeback is, it might not be perfect, but is it better than what we had before? And pretty much always they go, yeah, actually, it is probably better than what we had before. So it doesn't have to be perfection. One of my favorite sayings is you don't need the golden toilet seat. So you don't. You sometimes you just need the toilet, or maybe even the bathroom. I don't know, but we don't need to search for that golden toilet seat every time.
You mentioned earlier about your engagement with Lean HE. I know that you're also the network coordinator for the Change Special Interest Group of the Association of Higher Education Professionals. And you also engage with the Change Management Institution, which includes a variety of sectors. You talked a little while ago about the importance of that external engagement to you, but I'm wondering, how important is it to you in relation to informing your own professional development and your broader impact?
Just super important. When I joined the University of Nottingham, my line manager said, you should join the AUA. And it's now called the Association of Higher Education Professionals, so AHEP. At the time, it was AUA. And I was clearly quite young and impressionable at the time, so I just did what she told me to do, and I joined. And it was probably one of the best things I did, because it's given me access to people and information, knowledge that I just wouldn't have had if I hadn't joined. As I said earlier, I've been at the university for 12 years, but I do feel like I have a pretty good sense of what's going on at other universities. I talk to other universities fairly often. So it just gives you so much more network to draw upon. And I think that's one of the really special things about higher education, is that there is this willingness to talk to each other and share knowledge and share information. And it's the same with Lean HE. Through that, again, I've got opportunities I wouldn't have otherwise got. So I went to, well, actually didn't go because it was during COVID, but I attended their International Lean HE conference when it was hosted by Strathclyde. There was a session on, it's a lean tool called Hoshin Kanri. A lot of lean tools have a Japanese name. Basically, it's about strategic deployment. And off the back of that, they were like, oh, does anyone want to carry on this conversation and maybe have a community of practice talk about it? I was like, yeah, okay. Thinking, well, I don't think I'm an expert, but if I can learn from other people, then absolutely I want to. And then that ended up with us writing a book. So I contributed a chapter to the book with a colleague at Nottingham. She was she just moved on to head of school role in Surrey, but she was the deputy head of school in health sciences, where we'd done a lot of work trying to do strategic deployment within an academic school. I never thought I'd write a chapter in a book. Didn't think it was a thing, but yeah, I got that opportunity. And then with the Change Management Institute, I have managed to join a Heads of Change community of practice or special interest group, can't remember which term they're using. And for me, that's another really valuable source of information, so I can hear the challenges that are not just in my sector but in other sectors, because that group of people, it's both corporate and public sector, it's everything really. And it's the same stuff that I'm hearing, which is useful, and who knows where that might go. So yeah, really interesting experience, and I would encourage anyone in any sector to find those networks. Don't rely on your internal networks, find those external networks, because sometimes that's where you get the real learning and also the real support that you sometimes need. in a role.
Finishing up our conversation today, Luke, you came into higher education career by chance and you've developed your career pathway across a number of years. Higher education is a fast-paced environment and it can be an exciting place to be. What would be your pitch to encourage someone with drive and energy to come into the sector and be part of institutional change?
For me, I am a values-driven person. I mean, I think we all are, but in terms of my career, my work, I've always wanted to work in a sector that gives something back. I struggle to imagine myself going and working somewhere else where that isn't the ethos of the organisation. And just as a personal reflection, now they have within universities, they'll have access and participation plans, etc. None of that existed when I went to university. And I think I would have been in that criteria, which when I look back, I just think I am so lucky that I was able to go to university, get a degree in marine geography, obviously the ideal subject to go into a change role. But all of the extra things that I learned there that have set me up to have a career in higher education. So I think the sector is brilliant. I think we don't make enough of it as a country. And if you are someone who wants to work somewhere where you really do feel like you're making a difference, even peripherally, because I am very far away from any student now, I can still see the direct influence I'm having over that sector. So I think people should come and work in HE. We need new ideas, fresh faces, especially at a time where the sector is in difficulty. It would be invaluable. I worked with a number of people relatively recently who have come external, and they all go through the same kind of, well, probably change curve of going, holy mackerel, what is this place? And then slowly adjust. So I think that would be my advice. Don't expect to come in and think it's all going to make sense, because it doesn't always make sense. But it's a really good sector to work in with some really fantastic people. And you should come and join us.
Luke, it's been great talking with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for letting me shadow you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Job Shadowing HE. The podcast was written and presented by Susanna Marsden, audio production and music by me, Rodri Marsden. More information about this podcast and previous episodes can be found at jobshadowinghe.com.